Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media, signing black in and shining again, asking you to hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So here's this message. You see the title. Colorism is an example of this, but it's not the only one. And but it's going to be the easiest example of it because that is one of the things that has changed the most in terms of what women are looking for. Women have never changed their height requirements except to go up, literally. Women have not changed their income requirements except to go up, literally. They've not changed many other requirements, but what we do know is that black women, and to a certain extent even white women, but definitely Western sisters, for the most part, have changed their complexion requirements. And I'm going to be honest with you, they were not really requirements. See, in the 80s, dark-skinned brothers were not necessarily in style, but they were so common that if women did like them, all they had to do was pretend like, well, you know, he was persistent. All she had to do was play a little bit hard to get if he was a dark-skinned brother, and that was her type, because there have always been women that have wanted chocolate brothers. That's always been the case. It's just not something they can sit up and brag about a whole lot, unless, of course, they were in those pro-black circles. But see, that's what I mean when I say that attractive is different from in style. So, and to make a long story short, I'm going to tell you one of the ways I had to find this out the hard way, of course. But see, as I've gotten older, I've begun to remember things from a long time ago that I'd forgotten about since then. Much like Malcolm, when he wrote his autobiography, he began to recall the names of people, first and last names, of people he knew in childhood and had not thought about in over 3 decades. The same thing is happening in my case now. Now, I've lived longer than Malcolm lived. And those of you who have lived this long or longer have witnessed this phenomena sometimes. When I was a kid, back in the 80s, a child back in the 80s, I noticed, of course, that, you know, black women were with black men of different descriptions, shades. The description of the black men that they were never with was, for the most part, these were black men that were very skinny, wore glasses. Excuse me. Another thing I noticed was that if they were, they were, you know, very skinny and wore glasses, and they were just not scaring anybody else. They might not be with anybody. They could go a long time just single. But what I also noticed was that, frankly, a lot of these women were with different descriptions of men, but the majority of the time they were with medium or darker skinned men because those were the majority of our people anyway. And it makes sense. But for all that talk during the 80s about them liking light-skinned guys with good hair and pretty eyes, and they probably did sometimes, what was really going on was something else. What was really going on was that some of them did want that, some of them did not, and others liked both. Others had a variety of things they could appreciate in a man, but what's important to them is what was in style, and what I mean by that is with whom they can be seen out in the public in front of others and stick their chest out a little bit and hold their head up high because they could brag because others wanted it. The competition was a bigger influence on them and who they chose than their own personal taste and preferences. This is why it is, and black women seem to be more susceptible to this than even white women, but Western women in general are susceptible to this. And I don't think that any woman in any culture is completely immune to this either. But this was what was going on back then. They would say one thing, they would choose multiples. All they had to do was, if he's better melanated, they could simply, or I should say more abundantly melanated, they could simply say, well, he tried. He won me over, when in fact, he was her type to begin with. She just had to play hard enough to justify being seen out in public with him, which was a little bit easier to do because they were still also not so rare. Light-skinned guys, especially if they had so-called good hair and pretty eyes, may not even be her type, but he might be given a bit of an easier bit of a time, unless, of course, he just couldn't do it. Anyway, What I'm saying, gentlemen, is that what they like to do is they like to take whatever's not in style and make you think it is unattractive. They've done that in the 80s with dark-skinned brothers. And that's why dark-skinned brothers used to be the ones to tell me, oh, yeah, man, you know, you get older because you a half-breed, which I wasn't, or because you got that light skin and good hair, you're going to get them girls. Oh, well, you know, you hear that, and you think maybe, let's see what happens, I don't know, and then you get older and actually the opposite happens. Now, then you got to start, you really got to start thinking. So, unfortunately, we were not told this as men because we were trying to figure it out. And even older guys were trying to figure it out. Look, young blood, you ain't never gonna understand these women. Hey, man, all we needed was a network like what they have. And thank God for the internet and then for social media, because now we can compare notes and understand what they're like. And the reason why many men are becoming disaffected, why many men are becoming IBMO or SYSBM, is because of the damn lying. And there are men that are SYSBM that'll say, look, if she screws up, I'm going to be a monk. Because, see, now we know more things than what we used to know. We know that the vast majority, we know, not the vast majority, we know that most men might have 3 sexual partners in their entire lifetimes. Most women have more, if they're allowed to do so in a particular cultural context. A few men are the ones out there screwing the majority of these women that have these high body counts. So a few men are responsible for the high body counts of these women. Now we understand that because of the internet and social media, and because of advances in DNA too. This has also helped to know this for a genetic fact. The other thing too to understand is that at the end of the day, they're telling you that they like what's in style. They like to be seen out in public with what is in style. Their own personal preferences oftentimes are independent of that. They may be influenced by that over time, they may not, but their own personal preferences can be and are independent of that. So what they're trying to do is, if you're not what's in style, they want you to feel like you were actually unattractive, and that's different. I know that for a fact. You see, in the 80s, they were telling chocolate brothers they wanted guys with my phenotype, but not a lot of guys had my phenotype. Now, 89 hit, and that's when I was old enough to really start chatting them up. And they would tell me, you ain't all that. And they would say this without me even really having to do or say much, just, you ain't all that. But then if I acted like I didn't think I was all that, then it was, oh, you got low self-esteem. They could never see the middle. And I'm not the only one that went through this. Now, I may have had to go through it a little bit rougher, because in addition to this strange phenotype, there was one other barrier that I had to face, which is that my family was not from the city in which I was born or the city in which I grew up. My family was not from either one. And so most of the people had family there, whereas I didn't. So that was another barrier. It did make a big difference to a lot of them. It gave them, a lot of them the impression that I could not be explained, because you couldn't simply pull up a last name and say he's one of them, and that's why he looks this way. So there was also that. But at the end of the day, what I'm getting at is that then they would tell whatever was in front of them and it was offered to them, they had a history of saying wasn't really their type or wasn't all that. Nothing was really good enough to impress them. And this is not something unique to our culture, but the way in which it was done kind of is unique to our culture. Either way, what they wanted was for all men to think that they did not have what these ladies wanted. And ironically, they couldn't resist the men who thought that they were, either because these men thought this way because they found themselves to be irresistible, or the reverse. Whatever the case is, it's a positive feedback or a negative feedback loop. And every man got caught in one or the other, most of us in that negative feedback loop. So what I'm saying is, to my more abundantly melanated brothers, you do have a better shot right now in the beginning. You got a better start. And I'm glad when it pays off for you. So you do have you can get a foot in the door more easily. And in actuality, you've always had a chance. You've had the chance even when they said you did not, because you were simply too common, and frankly, you would never really, as a whole, you were never unattractive enough for them to look at. You were never unattractive enough simply because of your melanin. That was not really the case ever with these women. Although they acted like it in the 80s, that was really never the case. You were too common, and you just weren't ugly just based on being dark-skinned. They just played you. And then they turned around and did the same thing in the 90s with us. And so, in either case, I think we've both been played, just in slightly different ways. And in either case, that's a damn insult. Not that they have a preference, but I just think it's a damn insult. The way that they played it. All this deception. And this is why it is, ladies, that you're finding many of us going in another direction. Ladies, I will tell brothers, leave them Beckys alone. But I'm not telling them that to make you happy. I'm telling them that for them to be safe. I also tell them, leave them Joswamis alone. And leave them Zuleikas alone. And leave them Habibas alone. I specify these groups because of their people's relationship to black folks, period. That's why I tell them this. It's not to make you happy, and it's not to make you sad either. It's just strictly what it is that's best for them, what's safe for them. I'm not here to soothe your ego, and I'm not here to damage or bruise it. Some days I am here to bruise it because of something specific, but just out of spite, no, not really. However, if you want to ask me why it is that there even is such a thing as SYSBM and why I'm going to champion it, Jessica X will champion it. She'll say, look what y'all have done. I mean, just a few days ago, Jessica X had a live with D. Durrell, and he had to check out because he could not let her finish. He couldn't do it, but he would tell her to let him finish. He just kept doing it. Let me finish, but he would just keep cutting her off. He would use strawman arguments. He didn't have a passport. And in a nutshell, he was just plain wrong anyway. So he was the dumb nigga. Yeah, I said it, D. Durrell. The dumb nigga that kept on, that knew the least and argued the most and interrupted the most. That's exactly like how the people are where I live right now, which is why white folks dominate them too politically. I mean, economically. Not politically, but financially. That's why. They can talk all they want, and they have similar conversations. When are we going to get our act together? When we going instead of having the Europeans lead us in everything, they say the same thing, same conversations. You didn't know that, did you? And the thing is that while they have these conversations, it's the same thing. They're going to talk about it, get into these discussions, get into these debates, and the nigga that knows the least is going to do the most interrupting and talking down on everybody else, because subconsciously he knows he's a dumb nigga. The fact that he speaks Arabic and wears a thobe and wears that on his head does not mean that he's any smarter than us. We might think that, they might think that, but I know it's not the case because I've looked at both, made the comparison. You got dumb niggas everywhere. And matter of fact, the original dumb nigga's not even black. But because they cannot exchange information, they can't get anywhere, and that's exactly what we're dealing with. We can't exchange information with dumb niggas. Now, whether Jessica X should be allowed in the manosphere spaces, that's up to y'all. But the guys that have allowed her in have said that they were not actually manosphere. They're willing to tackle the issues, but they've said that they weren't manosphere, so this is not a treachery. A treachery is when you claim a particular loyalty and then you betray it. A treachery is not when you don't claim it and then you do something that's not in its interest. A treachery is when you make an agreement not to do something that's going to harm them, and then you do exactly that. That's a treachery. They didn't sign such agreement. They didn't make such claims. And D. Durrell, dumb nigga, was going to sit up here and join all these other guys who don't own passports or who do and just don't use them, and blaming us for things that some other unaffiliated guys had pulled off, like Miko, who didn't know about SYSBM that we know of, never claimed it, and whom we did not know until other people brought him to our attention. That's what's going on with us. But you got her sitting up here defending this, explaining why we have it and why such a thing is there, why IBMOR exists, which actually gives a preference to black women, just not Western black women, which I also agree with. Exists is because, again, gentlemen, we've been played. Now, if you fit that hypermasculine stereotype, straight up, what they did is they stereotyped you for a penis. And it pretty much said you can't really be a provider now. If you were able to show that you could be a penis and a provider, then that was even better, and that's fine. But the problem is that still did not guarantee that they were going to stay with you, and it definitely did not guarantee that they were going to admit it if they were the ones that screwed up and could not stay with you. That's still the issue. But on the other hand, you're not necessarily the one that gets vilified in public by these women under a certain age group. Tina Knowles did that to Richard Lawson, but she's also from another generation. I mean, hell, she's old compared to me. She did this. She put this stuff on Brother Lawson. No, he ain't perfect. She didn't even lie. It was why and how she said what she said that was the insult. Not even the content. She couldn't even joke like, "You perfect for me?" Or, "You close enough." If she had said, "Baby, you close enough to perfect. You ain't gotta be better." If she had said, "You a hell of a man." Nope, you ain't gotta be perfect. You deal with your imperfections the way a man should. Kudos to you. If she had said that, I would have had to stand up and salute the scream. But that's not what she said. Nonetheless, the point I'm getting at is that despite the fact that oftentimes you're not necessarily being disrespected privately or publicly, you are being disrespected on the slide to a certain extent. And that is that you're being stereotyped as a penis and everything else about you must be irresponsible until proven otherwise. And you get a chance to prove otherwise, thank God. Of course, the way we've been stereotyped is androgynous, weird, and as you know, weak in general, all this stuff. So mostly weird and androgynous. And the funny thing about it is that, see, with both of us, we have to be a particular stereotype. I mean, for even somebody my phenotype to succeed with most African American women of any neighborhood and any income level, he still has to be the niggerilla stereotype. Matter of fact, he has to be more of that than if he were abundantly melanated. That's the irony of it. But if he's a black man, period, he has to be a bit of that niggerilla stereotype. Now, he can be quietly intimidating if he's abundantly melanated. If he's light-skinned, he needs to be more intimidating to compensate. That's why when some guys say, "Man, what you talking about light-skinned brothers losing?" Man, we in. Well, either you're from the West Coast or the Midwest, where it didn't really change, and probably the rural Midwest at that. Or you may be exceedingly tall or you have extra muscle. Something else that will scare other men. But you're not a normal height, normal weight, light-skinned man, and you out here winning outside of maybe the West Coast and the Midwest with attractive black women. You just ain't. Certainly not in the Southeast, I know that. And I actually, because I've tried to get data on how it changes from region to region, I've actually learned where the demarcation line is. San Antonio. As you move from east to west, in Houston, light-skinned brother, you ain't in style. I'm not saying you're ugly, I'm saying you ain't in style. She may feel some kind of way being seen out in public with you. But San Antonio's by where it changes. By the time you get into West Texas, light-skinned brother, you in style again. But then the population thins out too. And the black population is very rare. You see how that works. It's crazy, isn't it? So anyway, that being said, what I'm simply getting at here is that, gentlemen, you have oftentimes been told that you've been made to feel like because you're out of style, you're also unattractive. And I also fell for that, thinking that, they found ugly what was out of style, when in fact, no. It's about the embarrassment and the pride. Really, it's about the ego. The competition for the same man that they have with each other drives their individual choices more than their own personal preferences do. Naturally, their own personal preferences must be reasonable because we have a species of 7 billion to prove it. And even then, that species has far fewer male ancestors than it does female ancestors. Not every individual. Every individual has an equal number of male and female ancestors, but the species of human beings, no race in particular, has far fewer male ancestors than female ancestors. Even then. Now you fast forward to today, and Western dating sites have done studies and shown that it is even more skewed. These women can go through every attractive man they want to go through in a particular city, a medium-sized city, within 3 years on a dating site. And then before you know it, they've gone through all of them. And 87% of men are unselected, whereas the chances are more fair for women. And all of this, we would think, is because, well, only a few men are attractive. Well, maybe only a few men are attractive in the West. That might very well be the truth. But in reality, you also have to factor in that not only do women find fewer men attractive, which I do believe to be true, but you also have to factor in that of those they find attractive, they're still going to put them through an extra filter. Do my friends approve? And maybe even, they might even see a man and think, this nigga ugly, but the other women want him, so I'm going to get him. Vanity is more important to them than their own preferences. Avoiding shame is more important to them than their own preferences. We needed to understand this a long time ago. Thank God for the internet and social media. There's more that I could say, but I think this is enough for now. Thank you for listening and being patient. The blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man, signing black out. Assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual non-select male power, specifically because they don't like it.